I'm Julianne from Leafling Learns, and I'm here to talk about how not to make Minimmersion a completely miserable experience for yourself. If you're not familiar with Minimmersion Weekend, it's an at-home language learning event hosted by myself. It's a time where you intentionally put your textbooks away, carve out time for yourself, and create an at-home language retreat for yourself. Many people know that immersion techniques are beneficial, but maybe they don't use them regularly or for extended periods of time, or maybe they don't know where to begin with immersion. This event is meant to give you a chance to throw caution to the wind and give it a try. And the thing that you need to know about this is that it isn't a challenge. It's not a language challenge. There aren't strict rules that you need to follow in order to succeed at the challenge. This is an opportunity to create a language retreat tailored to you specifically. This is an opportunity to engage in and enjoy target language content and discover resources that you'll love working with in the future moving forward. Because of that, you have to listen to how you're feeling as you're doing it. I'm not an expert at anything at all. I will never claim to be an expert at anything at all, but I have done this Minimmersion Weekend event 3 times. Each time I've learned a lot about what works for me. If you haven't participated in this amount of immersion before, or this extended period of immersion before, it's probably not going to be comfortable initially. It wasn't for me. It's going to be humbling. But if you can embrace the experience, you are going to learn so much about yourself and so much about your target language. First, let's talk about overcoming the main thing that will get in people's way. You have to sit through the initial discomfort and panic of immersing and get used to not understanding. In my opinion, immersing is a skill to get used to just like any other skill. It's the same as when you first use a textbook that you haven't used before. It might be a bit overwhelming before you are used to the format of it, before you've used it a few times and start to get comfortable with the experience. You didn't end up getting used to your textbook because you suddenly understand everything in it. You got used to the experience of using the textbook. You got used to how you encounter things that you don't know, and you had faith that the meaning of things would be revealed to you over time. Immersion can reveal meaning too, just in a different way. And some may say in a more organic way than in a textbook. If you allow yourself to sit through and feel the initial panic without letting it scare you away from what you're doing, it will dissipate. It doesn't feel like it, but it will dissipate. Once you feel calmer as you approach your target language, it will be easier to begin understanding what things mean in context. Planners rejoice. Coming up with a content plan for your Minimmersion weekend can be one of the most beneficial things that you can give to yourself. And this can be as loose or specific as you want it to be. When you start coming up with your plan of how you want to spend your weekend, think about what you would normally do in your day-to-day life and think about how you would do that in your target language. If you like video games, play video games. If you do yoga in your target language. If you like cooking, find a recipe in your target language. Engaging in our target language, doing activities that we find exciting or relevant to our lives, is going to be far more effective than forcing yourself to do activities that you wouldn't normally do anyway because they don't interest you. But on that same note, try some stuff you wouldn't normally do. Getting out of your comfort zone can surprise you sometimes. For example, even though I personally am dead inside, I did try playing a romantic otome video game. In Japanese, they're just these games where you find love with anime boys, which is very outside my comfort zone. But I actually really enjoyed the experience, and I enjoyed what I learned from it, and I'm gonna keep romancing anime boys if that's what it takes to have fun and learn the language that I'm studying. Big shout out to Ruby for helping escort me out of my comfort zone on that one. Prepare for decision fatigue. Something that often gets in the way of doing anything is thinking about what exactly you should do. And this weekend, we want to focus on just doing stuff, not thinking about what we should do or might do. One thing you can do is use the bingo board that we provide you on Instagram. You can use that as inspiration throughout the event of new activities to try if you're feeling bored with what you're doing. In the week leading up to the event, pick out resources that interest you or that fulfill any of these bingo board squares, so you don't have to spend your language retreat time hunting around for ebooks or games or podcasts or anything. One of my favorite things to do is to set up a buffet of materials for myself. I love the hoarding, I love the gathering. Pick out the things you've been wanting to try in all sorts of different formats. Make sure you have things to listen to, things to read, things to play. Allow yourself to taste test these things during this weekend. You don't have to commit to anything. Nobody will ever know. If something isn't clicking with you, ditch it readily. Read a page of something, throw it in the trash or recycling. If possible, aim to find things that are so fun that you forget that you're learning. And don't forget the cultural side of things. Learning about culture through your target language is a very powerful thing. It allows more depth than you'd get otherwise. Use this time to learn more about the country or the countries where your target language is spoken. It is extremely important to continuously check in with yourself and tailor this event to your energy level, because this is more of a marathon than a sprint. Due to it being over the course of a couple of days, you're going to have to adjust for your mental energy as you go. What I learned really quickly my first mini immersion was that going all in was way too much for me. Way too much for me. I initially attempted to only think in Japanese, to only speak in Japanese, as well as only consuming Japanese content. I was giving my brain no breathing room. There was no useful reason for me to be putting that amount of pressure on myself. It was making the enjoyable parts of the experience more difficult and more tiresome. And that's the opposite of what we want. It's definitely tempting to approach this like any other challenge where you're trying to do the most, but taking a couple hours break to watch your favorite native language reality television show while you eat dinner with your significant other, that's not going to ruin your immersion experience. It's really not. I can attest to this. Anytime I allowed myself to take more breaks, I ended up with more time overall spent with my target language because I didn't burn out so fast. Take breaks as you need to rejuvenate yourself, especially if you're new to immersing. You don't have to do 48 hours of immersion. It's not necessary. Not new to immersion or don't feel like you need to take a break, that's fine too. Just trust whatever you're feeling and adjust as needed. One other thing to touch on is you don't have to only do extensive reading where you focus on quantity, where you don't look anything up. And you don't have to do only intensive reading where you're slowly working through the form of a sentence, looking up every word that you don't know. In the language learning sphere on the internet, there's a lot of debate about which one is better, extensive or intensive. But how do I put this? Who cares? Do whatever you want to do. Switch between the two. Go crazy. Follow your heart. Check in with your energy levels. There's nothing inherently bad about either. And if something works well for you, that is incredible information to know and to lean into. If you notice you're feeling bored or tired while you're reading something and you notice, oh, I'm reading this quite intensively, I'm really taking my time on these sentences, maybe switch it up. Maybe just kind of read and see what you can get out of just reading quickly without looking things up, and vice versa. Just try stuff out. Doesn't matter. Now I have some quick tips to avoid complete misery during this event. The first tip, if you're going to be trying out a piece of media that you're really interested in, but it might be difficult, or maybe it's very specific in its vocabulary, its type of vocabulary, look up useful words ahead of time. You can do that before the weekend if you want to. For example, I may want to follow along with a Japanese sewing tutorial this weekend, so it would be hugely beneficial to me to familiarize myself with some of that kind of vocabulary that's essential to the sewing process beforehand in order to eliminate some of the friction of engaging with the content and participating in that activity. Co-host, founder Ruby, who is a genius, that's a fact, she made Anki cards of character names in a video game that she was going to play during the weekend, and it allowed her to play at a more natural pace. All right, number 2, even if you have some great books lined up that you've wanted to read forever, have something easy on hand too. Minimmersion is often a very humbling experience when confronted with what you know and what you don't know. Returning to an old favorite or a piece of media that you know will most likely be easy to comprehend is not a waste. It will solidify what you know, and if you're feeling down about not being able to understand something harder, it'll remind you that you understand more than you're giving yourself credit for. Use a graded reader, a kid's story, a kid's TV show, anything. If you don't have anything like that, it can be helpful to find something by looking through target language book reviews of children's books, and specifically look for any phrase that's like, fun for adults too. That way you know that it will be more comprehensible, but also won't be completely boring. And my third quick tip for misery avoidance is, if you're thinking about changing your phone language during the Minimmersion weekend as part of your immersion experience, try it out in small increments ahead of time. That way you'll have a better idea of how to use your phone, and you won't spend the whole weekend freaking out about how you sent something to somebody that you didn't mean to send to them. It can also be super helpful to block distracting apps and websites in your native language like Facebook. That way you won't feel like you're losing immersion time. Make it social. Make it a social event. Let people know what you're doing. Announce it to your friends and family so they can support you in making sure that you're getting the time that you want dedicated to your target language. Maybe you have a friend that would like to participate alongside you, and you never would have known if you didn't share this information with them. If you're looking for people to hang out with virtually, check out the Minimmersion hashtag, check out the Discord server for social activities and for chatting about immersion learning and your target language. Overall, it's important to keep in mind that creating an immersion environment for yourself is going to be highly personal, and everyone's experience is going to be vastly different based on their preferences. And it's not going to go perfectly. Maybe you can only do a few hours every day due to your personal circumstances, and that's great. Like, nothing's ever going to be completely perfect. You're never going to have a completely perfect situation in which to do this sort of thing. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't give it a try and make your best effort to do a little more immersion than you would have done otherwise during your weekend. So, in short, embrace ambiguity, embrace imperfection, embrace not knowing what the fuck is going on, and do whatever the fuck you want to do.